with each other. So when you want to move your hand, you'll get the picture in your mind on the piece of wood. Does that make any sense? You may have a picture in your mind that you're going to have this little curve here, or this bead here, or bead here, but then you go and move your tools, a piece of wood, and it doesn't always end up like that. But we have a few things we can help you to get to that point, so you don't have to have a lot of different tools and things to make all these spindles or things exactly the same. And it doesn't apply just to spindles. You can use them when you make bowls, platters, almost anything you want to. You may want to make a copy of that, and so you want to be able to do that at some time later. And that's the fun part. Did any of you see the demonstration a gentleman did maybe a year or so ago about making these little wooden whiskey barrel shot glasses? Some of you did. And he used several tricks on there that I'll mention to you tonight because I've used a lot of those when you make the whiskey barrels. I won't be making one of these tonight, but I'll give you some ideas on that. If I'm going to make a quantity of something, I'll make at least one or two and make sure that I can get it to work right. Then I'll save something like this, which is a setup block. This is white oak. This is dimensions here, here. It has a hole in the middle, and the approximate size are very close to the size that I want. Should be real close, a little bit shorter than what the barrel is. But then if you keep this, you don't have to recreate your model every time. So if you have jigs or something like that that you use in making your first piece, save those for the second, third, and fourth, and so on. And along with that, I put a little piece here, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute, that we can use to make the lines on the barrel. Now, when you're making a barrel like this, you may think, well, it's kind of arbitrary where you put the lines, right? You can put them wherever you want to. You can make them real close together, far apart. You can put two at the end and one on the bottom, whatever. The gentleman who was making this said he had the lines in a specific point, a specific place on the barrel, so when you put the chuck on it, it would go right in that groove. So you would never see the chuck mark. Would turn a bowl or turn a barrel like this, then put in the two grooves here and this, then he would turn it end for end, and one of those lines would fit exactly in the end of his chuck. So that's one of the benefits you have if you're able to reproduce things you're doing. And that was something that I hadn't seen before, but I thought it was a real cool idea. One of the other things that he did, and I thought I had a collar here, but if I find it, I'll show it to you later. He had his tool rest, banjo like that, and you know what a collar is? It's kind of like a big, thick washer, and he had one of that with a set screw right in here. So he didn't have to realign the height of this every single time. All he had to do is loosen this, and then you could turn it and do the end of the barrel, turn it back the other way like that. So that was a real time saver for him because he's making lots and lots of the same item, same height. That's something else that can help you. If you're making long spindles, and somebody today, or just a few minutes ago, said they had to make a spindle about 30 inches long and made it real small for a stairway. The old-time woodworkers, or wood turners, used a large tool rest, and a lot of times it had two pins in it. And I have one of those at home that I use to make those big balusters. And then you have two banjos, and you just sit it here, and then you don't have to keep moving this all the time. Does that make any sense? You can do the same thing, essentially, if you don't have that. If you buy an extra banjo and an extra tool rest, then you can put them side by side, and then you can just move from one to the other. You'll save yourself an awful lot of time. And that's what you want to do when you're making duplicates. You want to save as much time as you can. And by the way, if you have any questions as I go along, be sure and ask me, and I'll either tell you the right answer or I'll lie about it, one or the other. We'll start with this spindle here. This is actually out of my rocking chair sitting in the back room. Been there for, I'm ashamed to say probably 4 or 5 years. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this demonstration, I better see if I can make a duplicate of it. It has a couple of features here. It has a little tenon on the end that goes in the bottom of the chair, and then part here has a tenon on also that goes in the armrest. And so those are an important part if you're making a spindle. You have to get those exactly the right size, or very close, and about the right depth too. So you want to start with a piece that's approximately as long as the piece you're going to make a copy of, and start with that. And it can be any kind of wood that you want to if you want to just practice with it. Poplar is a good wood to practice with. It makes nice clean cuts, and you can buy a 6 or 8 foot dowel for a closet rod at some of the big box stores. And you just cut that in little sections like this and practice all you want. I don't recommend using pine or 2x4 or something like that. Has anyone tried to turn something like that? 2x4? Yeah. If you have tools that are very, very sharp, it works fine. But if your tools aren't really sharp, you've just got a bunch of ragged edges on it. Poplar won't do that. Hardwood's cherry, and oak will do it a little bit. Most of the woods, hard maple, they give you a nice clean cut. And speaking of cuts, last week Ray gave us a real good demonstration on sharpening tools, and I kind of cut him short on time because I thought we had less time than we did. But one of the things that someone showed me when you're sharpening tools, if you have a big magic marker, the part that you want to sharpen, put the black magic marker on it. Now, why would you do that? So you can tell when you sharpen it. If you are adjusting it, and if it just hits the top part and moves everything else black, then you need to move the tool rest. If you get it here but don't get it here, then you're still doing something wrong. But it's a real quick and easy way to find out if you're sharpening when you're first learning how to sharpen tools. And after you do it for a few years, why, you might get so good that you can do like some of the famous wood turners and just do it by hand and not need any jigs or anything like that. Let's see. Oh, this is an example too. A lot of spindles use beads like this. And if you have a piece of that closet rod, you can practice making beads like this or coves, and we'll show you what those are too. And if you want to practice using the skew and you get a catch or something like that. Any of you ever got a catch using a skew? Anybody that doesn't lie about? This is one of the things that I recommend if you're beginning to learn to turn, and especially if you're going to use spindles. This is called a safety drive, and the point right here in the center is spring loaded. So when you put it on a piece, the spring will retract inside of this. Then these little pieces right here will cut into the wood and give you your holding power so you can drive your piece. And if you get a bad catch, you throw your tool in there the wrong way, the wood will just spin. It won't go flying off in the air or kick you through the neighbor's door or anything like that. So that's a nice little safety feature. Also lets you find the center very easily. You just stick that right in the center if you made that. I have a little smaller one here. They come in different sizes. I think this is about 7/8, and I think this is a full inch. Maybe this is 3/4. I did forget one thing. I'll pass this around. This is one that I made earlier, if you want to pass that around. And while you're training your eye and your hands and your arms and everything all together, one thing that I like to do is a little device like this, and it can be any particular shape or form or whatever, but I put the piece that I'm trying to duplicate up here. So if I'm turning this and I look to see, well, how wide is that bead? Did I make this too big, too small? I can reference that very quickly. And again, these are all little things that you can do while you're learning to do these turnings. After you get good, you may not need to do that, but it's a good way to get started. And This piece started out like this. Someone gave me this piece of oak from a table leg or something, I guess. And I thought, well, it's about the right length, so we'll start working on that. And I went ahead and turned that down a little bit. And all of you, I'm sure have seen this before, where you find the center of a bowl or the center of a blank, whatever it is. It gives you little cross marks, and right in the center of that is the center of the piece. So you can use that when you're putting it here on the lathe. You can do corner to corner if you have a square piece, but if you have a round piece, it's pretty hard to find that dead center. And I got one of these from, I think, Northern Tool or someplace up there. And I just put it right where the two X's come together. Push it down. Real hard. And it makes a little snap and makes just a very tiny dent in there. You might see some wood turners, they'll take their drive and they'll put it in here and they'll hammer it down, drive it in there, put it in a vise, do something like that. You can do that. I typically don't. It's a good way to ruin your drive center if you do that. And this holds it just as well. So, let's see. Oh, would you want to plug me in over there?
Oh, I do what?
Plug the cord in, please. I got lucky on this. It already had a hole in the bottom, so I'll just put that on the tailstock end, and this will be my drive center. I guess it helps to loosen that, doesn't it? Okay, so we got our piece in here. We're ready to start turning. So we go to our lathe and turn on the lathe. But I can stop the blank whenever I want to because it's just spinning on that part that's sticking out. But if I go ahead and crank this up, it tightens it right on the threads of that drive spur. And now it won't stop unless I really hit it hard with a tool, something like that.
Crank it way down and split it.
Huh?
Crank it way down and split it.
Sometimes you do, but if you have that round part on the outside here, and you've already made a dimple in it, you won't split your wood very often, unless you really crank it too hard. The other thing I might mention too, if you don't make any spindles, you might want to make a tool handle for one of your tools. You can buy these without a handle, and this is one that I made. This is one that I made. This one, no, I bought that one. But it's a good experience because you can pick whatever kind of wood you want to for your tool handle. This is a exotic wood that's fairly heavy, and so it gives you a lot of good balance. And you can make it to fit your fingers, your hand, whatever you want if you're right or left-handed. That's always fun to do. Well, everybody likes to see chips fly, right? We'll see how good we are doing tonight. Things always work perfect in your shop, and then you go to do a demonstration for somebody, and then things don't always work the way you plan them to do. Right. I was waiting for somebody to tell me that. Put your face shield on. And especially if you're doing any public demonstrations like Dale mentioned earlier, because if you're doing this in front of a group of people and not wearing a face shield, they go back and try it and get something in their eye. It's your fault. That's what they'll say anyway. I start with my tool handle down, put this on the tool rest and then just lift it up. How far down do you go? If you started with a square blank, as soon as it starts to get round, then that's probably the diameter you want. If you start with a round piece like I did, you can take a pair of calipers and measure the largest diameter on your piece. And you'll find very often you'll have exactly the same diameter for this largest piece here as you will for this piece as this one here. They won't be recessed or set in, so you can try to turn the entire piece to the diameter of that. And we aren't quite there yet. Some people are more than happy to put the calipers on while the lathe is running. I don't usually do that because just for safety reasons. But if you do it and it works for you, that's fine. Again, how do you know when to stop? Well, with this, right? But you're going to have a tenon on this end, so it doesn't hurt if you make this a little bit smaller than the main part of your spindle. So I'm measuring this on my tenon end, and it's just a little bit smaller than what I need. So I want to match this diameter almost all the way across if I can. And that's where you're coordinating your eyesight, your brain, your hands, and machine, trying to get them all to work together. Oh, one other question. How fast should you turn your lathe on? What speed am I running? Huh? Yeah, you can do that. If you're doing bowls and larger vessels like that, speed is very, very important because that piece gets a lot of centrifugal force and can fly off the lathe, lose from your chuck, can come to pieces, fall in pieces. A spindle, very seldom does that happen. So if you have this nice and tight, you can go pretty fast and won't have a problem. And if you have green wood, you really get a lot of strips coming off. We'll see how close we are now. Just perfect, just a hair smaller, right? Any of you know a wood turner by the name of Nick Cook? He's done quite a bit of wood turning demonstrations. I watched him at one symposium, and he had a roughing gouge similar to that, and he used it for about 2/3 of the turning that he did. And so I wondered why he did that, and I asked him, he said, well, I can remove a lot of material very rapidly, so I use the roughing gouge as much as I can. If you look at this roughing gouge, can you see that on the camera? It's straight this way, but it's also almost straight across this way. So you can use it this way, almost like like you're using it to make it nice and smooth. as if you're using a skew or another tool. So you can use it to get this fairly straight with this tool without going to another one. Okay. Well, they don't look like they're very close yet, do they? Not really. I always look for places there's a transition. This is a transition right here from the tenon to the other part of the leg. This is another transition right here at the end of this to one side of the bead. The other side of the bead is another transition. Same thing on this transition here, and then of course one on the end. So how do you get that to go exactly and match that up when you're turning this? Well, one thing that a lot of different wood turners have shown me is this. And this is called, you can call it a story stick or a measuring stick or a lot of different things. But it's actually just a piece of plastic with a little bit of tape on it. You can use a hardboard, anything that's about this thickness, and then you make a mark. I made one here, and here to coincide with the transition part on that. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. And this also has an end, so you can reference off of that, so you don't get mixed up on where you are. And that's why you want the blank to be real close to the length of the one you're trying to duplicate. So what I'll do is I'll put my pencil right in this mark here and make a mark on the blank. Another point of transition, put it right here. Now with the lathe running, I can go ahead and use that. And I'll just use my skewer to make a little V cut here. And if you do something really crazy, it will stop this and you won't have that problem like we did before. So we know this is the length of our tenon and we want it to be smaller than this, so we'll start taking it down. Another thing that I learned is if you're using a skewer like this, and you want to make a very clean cut right here, you'll notice when I was doing the other part here, I had my skewer about this angle, so I was like a peeling cut. It just peeled that off. If you want a real clean cut here, you can go directly straight in, not at an angle, and you'll get a little cleaner shoulder right there. And this oak is pretty rough, but we'll do it best we can. And if you have your piece right here, you can kind of gauge, is this bigger than that one? It still is, so we'll keep working on it, right? And there's a variety of ways that you can determine if you have the right diameter. Of course, you can use the calipers. If you do put this on a piece and you're turning it, make sure that these ends are rounded off, that they're not sharp, because it can get caught very easily on your piece if those ends are sharp. Okay. We've got to go down a little ways yet. Okay. We can put that on. This is still too big, right? So what I will do, right here on the end, I will take this down as small as I can. And if I make this too small by mistake, it won't be a real big mistake because I have some tenon left here to go in the hole and make it tight. So I'll try to get this part right here about the diameter I want, and then move that diameter all the way across. Not quite, real close to it. Yep, we're right there now. So you see now I have a reference point for the diameter, and I can just move that all the way to the shoulder there. And you want your tenon to be straight across as much as you can. Maybe off a little bit, but it won't hurt if it's a little bit off. If you look at ones that are commercial, a lot of times they'll have a little rounded edge right here to make it easier to go in the hole. And you can do that with your skew, just cut that edge off just a little bit. Oh. Don't you love dropping tools in your shop? Have a concrete floor?
When they land
Yeah.
on your foot that way.
One thing I might mention too, when I'm doing any public demonstration like this or in front of a group of people or anything, and I need to move the tool rest, I will shut the lathe off and then move it wherever I need it, right? Or the tailstock, whatever. Have you ever seen somebody do this? You're cutting away. Oh, I need to make that different. Or stick it like this. I'm going to do, move this around when this gets caught or something. And look what you're throwing around in the air. Not a good idea. Okay. Now, if you don't like to use calipers and have something like this, what diameter is that? 5/8. Exactly what you need. Somebody told me you could sharpen the ends of that and then just jam it. I don't know if you could or not, but I haven't tried it. Some people say that you can, so I'll trust your judgment there on that. But this is a good way. You can get them in 1/2 inch, 3/4, 5/8, whatever, and that tells you that you've reached the right diameter. Okay? I was using this when I was making baseball bats a couple of years ago, and this is the same diameter as the end of the baseball bat. So I just put it on here, and I could tell when I got to that size. If this wouldn't go down, then it's still too big. So that's another real quick and easy way that you can use to do this. You can drill a hole in a piece of wood, 5/8 inch hole, put it down there and see if it fits or not. Just cut the hole in half when you saw it. All those things are little tricks that you can learn and use and see if they'll help you when you're working on this. Well, Still doesn't look quite straight across there. We'll see if we can get it a little better. Terrible. Now this is actually just a hair smaller, maybe a 16th or 32nd of an inch smaller than this. But you'll never notice that difference if this is on one side of the rocking chair and this is on the other side of the rocking chair. Or if this is even a 16th of an inch smaller than this end, you won't notice that difference either. So cut yourself a little bit of slack and don't get too worried about everything completely perfect all the time. I said we're trying to train our hands, our eyes, our brain to all work together. But you notice when I went across here, I kept my feet in the same place and just moved my body. And you'll find that you'll do that when you're doing bowl turning or spindles or anything else. A lot of times you'll leave your feet in exactly the same place and then just move your body wherever you need to be, around here, there, whatever you need. We need to go a little more on that. My pencil? Right there, thank you. So we've got the tenon here, we've got a bead here, we're going to have another bead right here, here. Oh, I made a mistake. Okay, we'll erase that then. And I'll put it right there. And there's the end of our other tenon. That's a nice advantage using a pencil. If you get a line in the wrong place, you get it too wide, you can narrow it down and get rid of it. Now that I have these transition points marked, I didn't get this exactly the right size, but we'll worry about that later. I'm going to mark my piece here with my skew. What's this? It's going to be a bead, right? So, start of a bead is a V-cut. Same thing on this side. This is another bead over here. And this is going to be the end of the tenon here, so we'll mark that also. And we can go ahead and take this down, but to save a little time tonight we won't do that, but that's what we would do with that. Okay, and then to make a bead, there's a lot of different ways. You can use this skew, you can also use a gouge, and we'll show you how to do that. This one here, we'll start with a skew. And you'll notice I'm taking very small cuts. A friend of mine, well, Randy Nagel, some of you may know him, he said when you're using a skew, you make a lot of small cuts. And he kind of likened it to Rome. Rome was not built in a day. Don't make all your hero cuts at one time. Just do it gradually. I'm using the tip of my skew. notice the beads, this was a lot wider than what that one is, so I'm still practicing, right? Typically, beads are made with a skew, and you use the point here to make a little bead groove like that, and then you move the tool down this way and get that little round edge on there. But once in a while, you may get a catch, right? But if you do, you've still got this, and it won't be any big deal. You don't have to go up and change your underwear right away. The other thing that I like to do is I like to do all of this cuts this way, this way. If I have a bunch more here, I'll go down this way. Then I come back this way. May use my left hand. I'll go back, make all the cuts here. Why am I doing all those repetitive cuts? Training my muscles, right. Training my eyes, my muscle coordination to get it all the same. It's easier to do that than it is to do this and this, this and this, you know, like that. Real small thing, but and you make a lot of these, or you get doing it, makes a lot of sense. Okay, you ready for the catch? Should have taken my own advice and got popper instead of this oak. What I just cut was a little bit of this right here. Now I'm going to go the other way with all my cuts. Boy, they don't look good at all, do they?
Hey, Danny, do you mark the center of your beads ever?
Mark the yes, I do. That's one thing I forgot to mention. Once you get your beads marked where they should be, if you put a pencil line right in the center of it, then you'll know that you shouldn't cut that. That should be the diameter of your bead. So if you lose that pencil mark, then you probably made your bead a little bit too small. Let's see if we can fix that a little bit here. If you have a bead like this that's real pointed and you don't want to spend a lot of time getting it the way you want it, just use the sandpaper. And again, I don't recommend using the tool rest while you're sanding, right? You get your fingers down there and have a problem. So, especially when you're doing the public demo, move that tool rest. Since all of you, or most of you, are experienced wood turners, I will show you one other thing you can do if you don't like to keep moving this all the time. You can sand from the back side. Safe. Your hands are not going to get caught in anything. You don't have to move the tool rest, but I still wouldn't show this to an average person who hasn't done any wood turning. But you can do a lot of sanding that way. Not this way. Okay. How are we doing for time? I guess we're getting close, aren't we? So now we need to make this shape right here. We need to go down here, and this is long. This is kind of like a pear shape. Can you see that? It's wider here than it is here. This is not in the center. It's off to one end. So Again, you can be looking at this and look at that at the same time. We're not there yet. We're getting closer. Okay, now I have to do this one. The other thing that I like to do, if I have to make this real small but leave this pretty large, I'll start here, take this off a little bit at a time, and then just work up to the lightest part. Because I'll take more cuts on this end because I have more to remove. We're getting fairly close there, aren't we? Shape and size. And if for some reason you leave a couple marks in here, you can use your sandpaper to take that out. Use a sandpaper to give you a little better bead than what you might have gotten before. So you can use this too as a tool. Okay, now for all you bowl gouge people out there, we're going to use a bowl gouge here. When I'm doing this, I present it to the piece of wood this way, and then I roll it over. That gives me the curve right there. We'll take your suggestion and put that to be the center so we won't bring that down at all. And then we need to make the other end match that, this end right here. So we'll try using a bowl gouge here. Another item that's true in a lot of wood turning, you notice this isn't straight. It has a little curve here, and curve here. Any of you recognize this? It's a piece I got from Steve Sinner. You notice it has a nice rounded curve here. And if you hold the straight edge up to it, it curves all the way. There's no flat piece on there. Typically, a little bit of a curve like that is more appealing to your eye than just a straight piece. That's one of the reasons why Steve uses this, and one of the reasons why they do it a lot. Am I right there, Phil? Okay. So that gives you another idea. We want to make this curve here, this curve here. I did an awful job on that, and a little bit here. How many of these has Steve made, Joe, between the...
This guy over here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. You were hiding there in the corner. How many of these have you made, Steve?
That I have cataloged over 500 of my own. Joe and I have made 300 and some together, and those are the ones that we cataloged. They don't count the ones that were made for demos or that ended up in the ravine or any of that sort of thing.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't see you sitting there, Steve. If you compare this to the size of the other pieces he's made, it's quite a bit smaller in size. But it has the same shape. And that's another part of learning to turn, is to transition from this piece to a bigger one, or a bigger one to a smaller one, a little bit wider. That's where you train your eye and your hands to work together.
The idea of keeping the same shape, or certain elements of the shape on all the pieces, is creating a body of work. So if you're interested in becoming a recognized wood turner, probably you're going to need to create a recognizable body of work. So if you go to one of the big symposiums where you walk into a room where they have an instant gallery with 1,200 pieces in it, you'll be able to look around there and recognize the works of several dozen different people just without looking at the name tags. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of money.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Oh, where are we at here now? Well, we've got this pretty well done here. And we got this correct. This, we sand this down. Could fix that, but we won't bother doing that. Let's go to the big boy. This is a very close replica of what the lady wanted me to make, a bunch of spindles, balusters, for her porch. And had to make these curves in here, the bead here, one here, a little bit of a pear shape in there. The whole thing here is pear shaped. Another one here. This is called a flat, right next to a bead, a flat piece. That's called a flat. Cove. And then I wanted to be done this way too. So I bought one of these things. I can remember where I put it. There we go. And you'll notice this piece will conform to whatever shape you have on the bottom, and then the piece on the top will be the exact reverse of it. See that? So you can, if you want to, if you have a board, you can draw this shape on this side, and it should be the same shape as this, only the reverse of it. That's another key, another trick you can use when you're trying to train yourself to see the right shapes and sizes and beads and coves and everything like that. I don't know where I got this. I think it might have been at one of the art supply stores, or I don't know if Harbor Freight might have one. Yeah, they're pretty common. And they're useful for a lot of things. If you're trimming woodwork in a house or something like that, you can put that up if it's not 90 degrees and do a lot of things with it like that. Incidentally, for those, I used exactly the same thing that I did here, only much larger, of course. Made a pattern. Each one of the transitions, I put a line in there, made that up, and then followed through with all the others after that. So you can use this for a small piece, some small ones like that, or you can use it for a larger one or a very large one. It's exactly the same principle, the theory, the idea.
I would assume of that tool that you had shown previously where it adjusts to the shape when you, if you just marked the ends of it with graphite or something and then touched it to the piece, I would assume it will at least highlight your high areas that you could take down.
Yeah. So you can use that. And again, these are all aids until you get your mind, your eyes, your hands and arms and feet all perfectly trained or trained out. Very good. Let's see if I have I'll mention these. I'm sure all of you are familiar with calipers. This is one I got at Harbor Freight or someplace like that. It's just made out of cheap plastic. But it will give you marks in inches, fractional inches, decimal inches, or millimeters, just by changing this up here. That's very useful whenever you're doing any kind of turning. This is the old standby. The old type with a dial, and by moving this, you change the width here. Now I had one that I brought yesterday when I was setting this up, like this, an electronic one with a battery, and I couldn't get it to work. That's the downsides of those. This you can't translate into tenths of an inch or hundredths of an inch or something like that, but you can get the fractions right there. Plus, you don't have to worry about it. You can just put it here, leave it down. You don't have to shut it off and do all that with it all the time. Any more questions?
I'll give you a practical situation here.
Sure.
I got a chain-ring bed. It's got 20 spindles across, and it's glued, and you can't get it apart. How do you get a spindle in with the...
How do you get a spindle in the bed?
How do you get the spindle in when the frame doesn't come apart, or you don't want to take it apart? Right. That's what I was
Would
gonna
you
say.
like to know that trick? You make one of these just like you would. Take your saw it diagonally. Put this piece in, and since that's sort of diagonal, you can move those in together, glue them together, and you'll hardly notice the difference. There might be better ways to do it, but that's one way that I've done it too.
I drilled holes in the end and put a spring in it, and that's another
Yeah,
trick.
that's another thing you can do, yes, yeah. Is that what you're going to mention back there?
Yeah, spring in the dowel pin and then put some glue in there and slide it in, and hopefully the springer will push it back into the hole. So I did that for my son's house, and it lasted for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. So there's all these little tricks you learn from somebody else or see someone else do it. Or if you just sit there and look at it, then you go to sleep at night, and about 2 in the morning you'll think, that's how I need to fix that, right? I should have stayed asleep in bed, right? Okay. Anything else that we didn't talk about yet?
The way I have put one of those in, which this was already done when I arrived on the scene, but they had actually taken the rail and cut a notch out of the side, put it in, put it down, put the block back in, glued it in place,
Yes.
and then painted over it. You could tell, but not bad.
Not real bad.
Yeah.
That's a
Crude way of doing it.
very crude way of doing it, and if you get it sanded good and get it painted and stuff, it'll be reasonable.
Going to stain it, that wouldn't work.
No, huh? Anything else? Okay.
Why they paint those trim and
Paint and caulk will make you the carpenter you ain't, right? Yeah, that's one of the reasons why they paint it. Just cheaper than to go through all the steps. When I was out in high school, just got out of high school, I worked for a painter, and first you had to stain the wood, then you put on a coat of sanding sealer, then you put on 2 coats of varnish, you sand it in between all those, and it's a very time-consuming process. You paint it, you put 2 coats on, goodbye. So that's one of the other reasons they paint it now. Well, thank you all very much. I hope I didn't bore you too much.